So Daniel 9:24-27 has nothing to do with the Messiah. So my response is there's no question that Christian versions translating the Hebrew Mashiach here with the Messiah are reading something into the text. However, what they're reading into the text is correct, since the prophecy is clearly about the work of the Messiah. In other words, the Hebrew does not say HaMashiach, the Messiah. But what's interesting is that in basically every noun that's spoken of here, you don't have the definite article. If you read it in Hebrew, you'll find almost no definite articles. It's an anointed one, it's a prince, it's a city, it's a sanctuary. It's just very interesting the way it's written. Some say that that's typical of kind of a visionary description. So the fact it doesn't say the Messiah is not as big a deal as people make it, because nowhere in the text is it singling out. It's got anointed one, a prince, a city, a sanctuary, etc. Plus the fact that in the Hebrew Bible, Mashiach, as we saw, does not in and of itself always signify the Messiah. In fact, most all the usage is just about an anointed one, an anointed king, an anointed priest, etc., etc. And then ultimately we see that these prophecies about a Mashiach refer to the Mashiach, the Messiah, the anointed one who's going to do it all. So my point is simple. I don't think Christian translations should translate with the Messiah. Either translate with the anointed one or an anointed one, but we understand who the anointed one is, okay? Very simple. The Christian translations that translate with the Messiah are reading more into the text than they should for translation's sake. But is it a right and fair interpretation? Sure it is, because of the magnitude of what has to happen through the work of this Mashiach. That's first thing. Second thing, it's argued that Daniel 9:24 was not fulfilled by Jesus. In other words, he didn't finish transgression. He didn't put an end to sin. He didn't atone for wickedness and bring in everlasting righteousness, because we still have a messed up world. Well, here's the response. First, when you read that and ask a Christian, who does that speak of, who did that, they immediately say, well, Jesus did that. They don't have a problem seeing that he fulfilled this. Secondly, this was a prophecy that had to be fulfilled before the second temple was destroyed. If he didn't do it, then Daniel's a false prophet throughout the Bible. And this whole significant vision that God gives him about Jerusalem's future didn't happen. So you have to turn it around and ask the question, who is the candidate that you would associate with atoning for wickedness and bringing in everlasting righteousness and sealing up vision and prophecy and finishing transgression? In other words, dealing with sin once and for all in a definitive way, making atonement available and bringing in God's righteousness, which we have all received as a gift in transforming way through faith. If it's not Yeshua, then it's nobody. This is not one of these things that it says, in the future, this is going to happen. And you say, well, Jesus didn't do that yet. In the future, the Messianic King will rule over the entire world. There'll be no more war. Well, he hasn't done it. He hasn't done that yet, but he's in the process of doing it, and he will finish that work. But this is something that has a time frame of what's going to happen during the days of the second temple. If Messiah doesn't do it, it's never been done. Some critical scholars say, well, it referred to certain things that happened in the 2nd century and the purging of the sanctuary and so on. It's a bigger prophecy than that. Did he atone for wickedness or not? Did he deal with sin or not? Did he make the way for everlasting righteousness to come in? Did he fulfill and seal up what was written in vision and prophecy? Was the most holy anointed, which in certain cases can actually refer to an individual in Scripture. Either it's Jesus or it didn't happen. This is not one of those things, he didn't fulfill it. If he didn't fulfill it, throw it out. Because this is something that had to happen within a time frame. So you ask the question, which Mashiach, which anointed Jewish leader and ruler is the best candidate for dealing with sin and transgression and making atonement for God's people before the destruction of the temple? Again, you have one candidate and one candidate only. I did a radio debate many years ago with Tovia Singer, and he read this passage out loud and said, come on, just ask Ask yourself, has this happened? And as he read it, this joy was bubbling up in my soul because I'm thinking, man, he did it. How wonderful he did it. Okay, another objection. Christian translations of Daniel 9:24-27 divide the 70 weeks incorrectly, and the dates have no relation to the time of Jesus. Now, actually, there are different ways that are acceptable in Hebrew grammar to divide the weeks, but either way is fine with me. Either way is not an issue. Here's the argument. Okay, go back to verse 25. There will be 7 sevens. Stop, right? So no one understands this from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until an anointed one, the ruler comes, will be 7 sevens, in other words, 49 years. So there's got to be an anointed one it's speaking of then. There are 2 anointed ones. Could be. Doesn't trouble me at all. And then for 62 sevens, it, namely Jerusalem, will be rebuilt with streets in the trench, but in times of trouble. And after the 62 sevens, an anointed one will be cut off, will have nothing. I have no problem dividing it into 7 sevens, perhaps the period of the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the temple, and then 62 sevens, the next period of time. It's a period of time of total of 483 years until anointed one's cut off. I don't have a problem with that. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So we know when that happens in 70. The great Jewish war with Rome, especially from 67 to 70, and Titus comes and destroys Jerusalem, and the sanctuary is burnt, temple's built. Okay, so it's within this time frame that this has to happen. I don't mind if you divide the verses, and if you have 2 different anointed ones. There's a Mashiach here who's a leader, and then there's a Mashiach who's going to be cut off, who's going to die, who fulfills these passages about atoning for wickedness. It's not a problem to me. Now you have to understand something. There's endless debate about this word. No one understands this from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler. What was the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? There are endless discussions. Maybe it means this word here. Maybe it means the word of Cyrus, the Persian king, that Jerusalem would be rebuilt. He decreed it. Read the end of 2 Chronicles 36, that the temple would be rebuilt. But his was not so much the rebuilding of Jerusalem, but the temple. You have all these other ones. You have somewhat an obscure word of King Artaxerxes, in around 445 BCE. And then you end up with this alleged prophetic year where there are 360 days in a prophetic year, supposedly according to Scripture. And then when you trace it out, boom, it comes right to the day where Jesus is crucified, this amazing thing. Listen, there's no way just reading the text you're going to identify that edict in 445 BCE as the word. Some may argue for it, but it's highly disputable. You say, so where's the great proof? The great proof is that here is a prophecy telling us of a significant scheme of redemption, which is far bigger. Listen, Daniel's in exile, and he's praying. The temple's destroyed. The people are living in shame and reproach. God's name is being blasphemed. God, what about all this? Act and have mercy. And God says, actually, it's not just 70 years we're talking about. It was 70 times 7. God promised judgment, Leviticus 26. He talked about multiplying it 7-fold. We're actually talking about something bigger than 70 years. We're talking about 70 times 7, 490 years. And this is the big answer to your question, Daniel. The big answer to your question is not just the exiles are going to return and the temple is going to be rebuilt, but before the temple